firstly to start with, it had the original 10, I think they were called 102 engines. It wasn't like the Hunter. The Hunter was quicker, without a doubt. Even the Nat was quicker on the acceleration. But you got used to it fairly quickly, and it had so many useful instruments, not least the incidence gauge, alpha, which is something that none of the other aeroplanes had. So instead of having to calculate takeoff speeds and landing speeds particularly, for landing, one approached at 12 alpha, and it had a double dot on the head-up display, which again we hadn't had. So I didn't have to look in and search for speed or anything. It was all presented, focused at infinity in front of my eyes. So to come into land, you select 12 alpha, and if you're not coming down fast enough, you just take a bit of power off and keep the 12 alpha and onto the ground. It was just delightful. And one knew that on takeoff, on a Hunter fully loaded, if you weren't sure and you pulled, and you wouldn't sure how much you'd pulled because there was nothing to say how much you'd pulled. So you could arguably stall it slightly on takeoff. Whereas with a Jaguar, you'd have to be a bit ham-fisted to do that because you'd pull to 12 and maybe 14 to just get it unstuck, put the gear up, and you could give it back a bit. But you knew precisely what it was. So it was controllable. So the fact that it maybe didn't have as much power as we would have hoped, that was okay. You could get by with it. And once you got it going, it would crack along at 420 very happily, 480 if you needed to, and if you cleaned it up and polished it, you could go at 1.2. So really, it was pretty slippery once it got going. To overcome my comment that it was slow, in the Gulf War, we flew it at over 32,000 feet, fully bombed up, at 0.9 Mach, not in reheat. So it wasn't that slow.
I think the Jaguar was a sort of much maligned aircraft, in truth, because it obviously started its life, it was intended to be an advanced trainer, but it was clearly much more capable than that. And if you look at the other aircraft of that era, it was the first aircraft we had which had a sophisticated nav and attack system in it, had an inertial platform. So although the Harrier had a weapons system, it was nowhere near as advanced as the Jaguar. So Jaguar, very, very good navigation and attack system, actually carried a good weapons load, and it went a reasonable distance as well. The one thing it didn't do very well was turn. It wasn't overly endowed with great power, and the design of the wing, which was to make it really stable at low altitude, meant that it just didn't have great turning performance. So it was always slightly maligned as, well, it doesn't turn very well. That did not mean that it was not a really good aircraft for its roles.